Right now, in this exact moment, there is a spacecraft sitting on the far side of the moon that no human eye has ever seen with their own vision, beaming signals back to Earth through a relay satellite parked in a gravitational sweet spot 200,000 miles away. And at the same time, on the other side of this new race, a rocket taller than the Statue of Liberty is being prepared to send American astronauts back to the lunar surface for the first time in over half a century. This is not history. This is happening right now, in our lifetime, and most people have no idea how intense this competition has actually become. What you are about to hear is the real story of the second space race, a race that is quieter than the first one, but in many ways far more dangerous, far more strategic, and far more important for the future of our species. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the moon has suddenly become the most valuable piece of real estate in the entire solar system, and why two of the most powerful nations on Earth are pouring billions of dollars, their best engineers, and their national pride into getting there first. Let's start with something most people never think about. The moon has two faces. One face has looked at Earth every single night for 4.5 billion years. The other face has never been seen by a human eye, not once in the entire history of our species, until spacecraft cameras finally captured it in the 20th century. This far side of the moon is rougher, more heavily cratered, and strangely, its crust is much thicker than the near side we see every night. Scientists still argue about why these two hemispheres are so different. Some believe it has to do with an ancient companion moon that crashed into the far side billions of years ago. Others believe it is connected to how the moon cooled unevenly after it formed. Whatever the cause, the far side is a scientific goldmine, untouched, unexplored, and until very recently, completely inaccessible. Before we go any further, it helps to remember just how strange and hard won our entire relationship with the moon has been. Ancient civilizations tracked it across the sky for thousands of years before anyone truly understood what it was. It took until the 20th century for humans to send machines close enough to photograph its surface in detail. And it took the fierce political rivalry of the Cold War to finally push human beings physically onto its surface. Between 1969 and 1972, 12 American astronauts walked on the near side of the moon during the Apollo missions, collecting rock samples, planting scientific instruments, and even driving battery-powered rovers across dusty lunar plains. The Soviet Union, meanwhile, never landed cosmonauts on the moon, but they achieved something equally remarkable through robotic missions, successfully returning lunar soil samples to Earth using uncrewed Luna spacecraft. After Apollo ended in 1972, human beings simply stopped going. For nearly 50 years, the moon became a place we only visited through memory, old photographs, and archival footage, a monument to what humanity could achieve when it truly decided to try. That 50-year silence is the backdrop against which everything happening today needs to be understood, because what we are witnessing right now is not a continuation of something ongoing. It is a genuine revival of an ambition that the world had quietly allowed to fade. Here is the problem that kept everyone away from the far side for so long. If you land a spacecraft on the far side of the moon, you lose direct communication with Earth. The moon itself blocks the signal. For decades, this made the far side essentially a no-landing zone. You could photograph it from orbit, but you could not safely put a lander there and expect to talk to it. This single technical obstacle protected the far side like a locked vault for the entire 20th century. Then in 2018, China did something nobody else had ever attempted. They launched a small relay satellite called Queqiao, named after a bridge from an old Chinese legend, a bridge made of magpies that lets two separated lovers meet once a year across a river of stars. China placed this satellite in a special orbit beyond the moon, in a gravitational balance point where it could see both the far side of the moon and the Earth at the same time. This satellite became the communication bridge that finally unlocked the far side of the moon for exploration. It was elegant, it was clever, and it changed everything. It is worth pointing out that the far side is not simply a mirror image of the side we know. Because the far side's crust is thicker, fewer of the ancient lava flows that created the dark, smooth plains visible on the near side, the features early astronomers mistook for seas and still call Maria today, were ever able to break through to the surface. This means the far side preserves far more of its original, heavily battered crust from the earliest and most violent period of the solar system, when the inner planets were still being pummeled by leftover debris from planetary formation. In a very real sense, landing on the far side is like being handed a page from the very first chapter of the solar system's history book, a chapter that has been almost completely erased on the near side by billions of years of volcanic resurfacing. A few months later, in January of 2019, China's Chang'e 4 mission touched down inside the South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the oldest and largest impact craters in the entire solar system, located on the far side of the Moon. This was the first time in human history that any spacecraft had ever soft landed on the far side. Not the Soviet Union during the space race, not the United States during Apollo, not any private company. China did it first, and they did it using a communication trick that required years of careful orbital planning. The lander released a small rover named Yudu 2, meaning Jade Rabbit 2, which began rolling across terrain that had never been touched by any machine humans had ever built. What Chang'e 4 found out there was fascinating. The rover discovered subsurface layers with unusual mineral compositions, different from anything sampled on the near side during the Apollo missions. It found evidence suggesting that some of the material deep underground may have originated from the Moon's mantle, thrown up to the surface by an ancient massive impact. This gave scientists a rare window into the interior structure of the Moon itself, information that simply could not be gathered from the near side. What makes this mission even more remarkable is how long it has lasted. Yudu 2 was originally designed for a relatively short operational lifespan, yet years after landing, it continues to wake up and resume operations after each frigid 2-week-long lunar night, when temperatures on the surface plunge low enough to destroy most electronics that are not carefully protected. Each time the sun rises again over that section of the far side, mission controllers in China re-establish contact and send the rover rolling forward another small distance, slowly building one of the longest continuously operating records of any rover on the lunar surface. Over its extended mission, Yudu 2 has traveled well over a mile across the far side, an almost unbelievable distance for a small robotic vehicle navigating completely unfamiliar and hazardous terrain without any possibility of a rescue mission if something goes wrong. But China was not finished. In 2024, they launched an even more ambitious mission called Chang'e 6, and this one had a goal that sounds almost impossible when you say it out loud. Land on the far side of the Moon, drill and scoop up lunar soil and rock samples, launch back off the surface, dock with an orbiter, transfer the samples, and fly everything back to Earth safely. Nobody had ever attempted a sample return mission from the far side before. The near side had been sampled by the Americans during Apollo and by the Soviets during their robotic Luna missions, but the far side remained completely unsampled by human hands. Chang'e 6 succeeded. It touched down in the same South Pole Aitken Basin region, collected close to 2 kilograms of material using both a drill and a robotic scoop, and successfully launched that material back into lunar orbit before returning it to Earth. When the samples landed in the grasslands of Inner Mongolia, it marked one of the most significant achievements in the modern history of lunar science. Laboratories around the world are still analyzing that material today, and early findings suggest these far-side samples are billions of years older in some respects than anything brought back from the near side, giving scientists a more complete timeline of the Moon's volcanic history. To really appreciate how difficult this mission was, think through everything that had to happen in the correct order. thousands of miles from the nearest human being who could step in and fix a problem by hand. A spacecraft had to descend through no atmosphere at all, using only thrusters and onboard computer vision to pick a safe landing spot in real time, since a signal from Earth would take too long to be useful for last-second corrections. It had to survive the landing itself, then operate a drill and a scoop mechanism in an environment coated with extremely fine, abrasive lunar dust known to damage delicate machinery. Then, incredibly, a portion of that same lander had to ignite its own engine and lift off the surface, something only a small handful of missions in history had ever done successfully. Find and dock with a tiny orbiter circling far overhead, transfer the sample container with total precision, and only then begin the long journey home. Every single one of those steps had to work perfectly on the first attempt, on the side of the moon, where no direct radio contact with Earth was even possible without that Quekiao relay bridge quietly doing its job in the background. When you understand the sheer number of things that had to go right, the success of Chang'e 6 becomes one of the most quietly impressive engineering achievements of this entire decade. China's broader lunar strategy did not appear overnight. It has been built up methodically across more than 20 years, starting with simple orbital missions in the mid-2000s designed purely to photograph and map the surface, followed by increasingly ambitious landers, followed by sample return, and now building toward crewed flight. This step-by-step approach mirrors the way China has approached large infrastructure projects in other areas of its economy, favoring steady, well-tested progress over dramatic leaps that carry higher risk of public failure. It is a philosophy built on patience, and so far, it has delivered a nearly unbroken string of successful lunar missions, a track record that stands out in an industry where failure is common and expected, even for the most experienced space agencies in the world. Now here is where things get interesting from a strategic point of view, because China has made it very clear that these missions are not just about science. They are building towards something much bigger. China has announced plans for a permanent robotic and eventually crewed research station near the lunar South Pole, called the International Lunar Research Station, often shortened to ILRS. This is not a small outpost. This is meant to be a long-term, continuously operating base, similar in ambition to how the International Space Station operates in low Earth orbit, except this one would sit on the surface of another world. China has already lined up international partners for this project, including Russia, and has signed cooperation agreements with a growing list of other nations. The plan involves multiple phases. Chang'e 7 is expected to explore the lunar South Pole in detail, searching specifically for water ice deposits hidden in permanently shadowed craters so deep and so oriented that sunlight has not touched their floors for billions of years. Chang'e 8 will follow with technology demonstrations for in situ resource utilization, essentially testing whether it is possible to use lunar soil and ice to produce building materials, oxygen, and even rocket fuel directly on the moon instead of shipping everything from Earth. China has stated a goal of landing its own astronauts, which they call taikonauts, on the lunar surface before the end of this decade. To achieve this, they are developing a new heavy-lift rocket called the Long March 10, along with a new crewed spacecraft simply called Mengzhu, meaning dream vessel, and a dedicated lunar lander. Unlike some Western approaches, China has generally favored a more traditional, government-controlled, methodical development style, testing each component thoroughly before combining them into a full crewed mission architecture. The planned mission profile for China's first crewed landing gives a good sense of how carefully this is being engineered. Rather than launching everything needed for a moon landing on a single giant rocket the way Apollo did, China's plan calls for two separate Long March 10 launches, one carrying the crewed Mengzhu spacecraft and the other carrying the lunar lander component, with the two vehicles meeting and docking in lunar orbit before astronauts transfer across and descend to the surface. This two-launch approach reduces the performance demands placed on any single rocket, since splitting the mission into two smaller pieces is mechanically simpler than building one truly massive vehicle capable of carrying everything at once. It does mean that two separate launches have to go perfectly, and then find each other in space near the moon, adding its own complexity. But it is a strategy China has already tested extensively with its space station construction, where multiple modules and crew vehicles have successfully docked in Earth orbit dozens of times without incident, giving mission planners a high degree of confidence that the same rendezvous and docking techniques will translate successfully to lunar orbit. Now let's cross over to the other side of this race, because while China has been quietly and steadily building toward the far side and the lunar South Pole, the United States has been running its own massive and very public program called Artemis, named after the twin sister of Apollo in Greek mythology, a deliberate and poetic nod to the original moon program from the 1960s and 70s. Artemis is fundamentally different from Apollo in its goals. Apollo was about winning a political race against the Soviet Union as quickly as possible, planting a flag and proving a point. Artemis is designed around sustainability. The stated goal is not just to visit the moon again, but to establish a long-term human presence there, including a base camp on the surface and a space station in lunar orbit called Gateway, which would serve as a staging point for missions to the surface, and eventually as a stepping stone toward crewed missions to Mars. The Gateway station deserves its own moment of attention because it represents one of the more unusual pieces of this entire architecture. Unlike the International Space Station, which orbits close to Earth and can be reached in a matter of hours, Gateway is being designed to orbit the moon itself, in a highly elongated path that keeps it in a stable position using minimal fuel, while still providing relatively easy access to the lunar surface below. The idea is that astronauts would first travel to Gateway aboard the Orion spacecraft, then transfer to a separate lander for the trip down to the surface, and later return to Gateway before heading home to Earth. This adds complexity compared to the direct descent-style missions of the Apollo era, but it also creates a reusable piece of permanent infrastructure in lunar space, one that international partners including Japan, Canada, and members of the European Space Agency are contributing modules and hardware toward, turning Artemis into a genuinely multinational endeavor even though the United States remains firmly in the lead role. The first mission in this program, Artemis 1, launched in November of 2022. It was an uncrewed test flight of the enormous Space Launch System rocket, standing over 300 feet tall, generating more thrust at liftoff than the Saturn V rockets that carried Apollo astronauts to the moon. The Orion spacecraft, which will eventually carry astronauts, flew around the moon on this mission, testing its heat shield, its life support systems, and its overall performance during the incredibly hot and fast re-entry required when returning from deep space. The mission was widely considered a success, though engineers did find some unexpected wear on the heat shield material that required additional review before clearing the spacecraft for crewed flight. Artemis 2 is planned as the first crewed mission of the program, sending astronauts around the moon without landing, similar in profile to Apollo 8, but using entirely new hardware. This mission has faced delays, pushing its timeline further than originally announced, largely due to the heat shield investigation and various technical readiness reviews that NASA insists are necessary before risking human lives on a brand new spacecraft. Artemis 3 is the mission everyone is really waiting for, because this is the one intended to actually land astronauts on the lunar surface, including the first woman and the first person of color to walk on the moon. A symbolically powerful and historically overdue milestone. The landing site for Artemis 3 is planned near the lunar South Pole, the exact same region China is targeting with its own program, and this is not a coincidence. The South Pole is scientifically valuable because of those permanently shadowed craters containing water ice, which could one day be converted into drinking water, breathable oxygen, and rocket fuel for future missions deeper into the solar system. Behind every one of these missions are the astronauts themselves, and both countries have been quietly preparing their crews for years in anticipation of these landings. NASA has already selected the astronaut corps for early Artemis missions, drawing from a pool of highly experienced pilots, engineers, and scientists who have spent years training in mock lunar terrain facilities, underwater neutral buoyancy pools that simulate reduced gravity movement, and extensive simulator sessions replicating every phase of a lunar landing and surface excursion. China has likewise been expanding and training its own taikonaut corps well beyond the numbers needed for its existing space station program, a clear signal that a dedicated lunar astronaut selection and training pipeline is already underway behind the scenes, even though China has revealed far fewer public details about the specific individuals being groomed for these historic first lunar missions. In both cases, the astronauts chosen to actually set foot on the surface will instantly become some of the most recognized and celebrated explorers of the century. And the selection process itself, though largely hidden from public view, is already one of the most consequential decisions being made inside each space program today. Here is where the Artemis program gets genuinely complicated, and where a lot of the public conversation and criticism has focused. NASA is not building its own lunar lander the way it built the Apollo lunar module decades ago. Instead, NASA has contracted private companies to build the landing system, and the primary contract went to SpaceX, using a modified version of their massive Starship vehicle as the human landing system. This approach is meant to save costs and encourage a growing commercial space industry, but it introduces an enormous amount of technical complexity, because Starship requires multiple refueling launches in Earth orbit before it can even head to the Moon, an operation that has never been attempted at this scale before. NASA also selected Blue Origin, founded by Jeff Bezos, to develop a second independent lunar lander called Blue Moon, intended to provide a backup option and encourage competition between providers. This is a fundamentally different philosophy than China's approach. China is building its entire crewed lunar architecture as a single integrated government program, with one rocket, one spacecraft, and one lander, all developed and tested internally. The United States is instead relying on a mixed public-private model. Government builds the rocket and crew capsule. Private companies compete to build the landers. Each approach carries different risks. The Chinese method offers more centralized control and consistency, but can move at the pace of government bureaucracy. The American method introduces competition and innovation, but depends on the success of extremely ambitious private sector engineering, including Starship's unprecedented orbital refueling requirements. Let's talk about timelines honestly, because this is where the real tension of the space race lives. China has publicly targeted landing its taikonauts on the Moon before 2030. NASA's Artemis 3 landing has been repeatedly delayed from its original target, and now realistically points toward the later years of this decade as well. Both programs are chasing remarkably similar timeframes, which means whichever program stays on schedule and avoids major setbacks could realistically become the first nation in this new era to plant boots back on the lunar surface, and specifically, the first nation to establish any kind of ongoing presence near the lunar South Pole. Why does the South Pole matter so much to both countries? It comes down to water. Data from multiple orbital missions, going back to instruments flown by India, the United States, and other space agencies, has confirmed that water ice exists in permanently shadowed craters near both lunar poles. Water is arguably the single most valuable resource in space exploration, not just for drinking, but because it can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, which are the primary components of rocket fuel. A base near the lunar South Pole with access to water ice could theoretically refuel spacecraft on the Moon itself, dramatically reducing the cost of deeper missions into the solar system, including eventual trips to Mars. Whoever controls the best access points near these ice deposits gains a massive strategic and economic advantage for the coming decades of space exploration. The geology of these permanently shadowed regions is genuinely bizarre when you stop to think about it. Because certain crater floors near the poles never receive a single ray of direct sunlight, due to the moon's very slight axial tilt, temperatures in these craters can drop low enough that any water molecules drifting across the surface over billions of years, delivered by ancient comet impacts or solar wind interactions, would have frozen in place and simply stayed there, essentially trapped in cold storage since long before complex life even existed on Earth. Some scientists describe these craters as time capsules, preserving a frozen record of the solar system's water content across enormous stretches of geological history. Extracting that ice will not be simple, since it likely exists mixed into the soil rather than as clean sheets of visible ice, and any mining or extraction equipment will need to operate in complete darkness at extremely low temperatures, without ever seeing direct sunlight to recharge solar-powered batteries. Which is precisely why both American and Chinese mission planners have spent so much time designing landers and rovers capable of operating for extended periods using only stored power and radioisotope heating units instead of relying on sunlight alone. This is also where geopolitics becomes impossible to ignore. The United States has led the creation of what is called the Artemis Accords, a set of principles for the peaceful and transparent use of space, including the moon, signed by dozens of countries around the world. China and Russia have not signed these accords, and instead are building their own competing coalition around the International Lunar Research Station. This means the world is essentially forming two separate blocks of lunar cooperation, similar in some ways to how nations aligned during the Cold War, except this time the frontier is not a divided continent. It is a divided moon, with different landing zones, different partner nations, and different rules potentially being established for how resources like water ice can be claimed, used, or shared. Some experts have raised concerns about what happens if both programs successfully establish infrastructure very close to each other near the South Pole. The best landing sites, the ones with the most sunlight for solar power and the closest access to shadowed ice deposits, are limited in number. There have already been discussions at the diplomatic level about how prime lunar real estate should be allocated, since existing space law, primarily the Outer Space Treaty from 1967, was written decades before anyone seriously planned to build permanent bases on the moon, and it leaves many of these questions frustratingly unresolved. The Outer Space Treaty was drafted at the height of Cold War tensions, and its core principle states that no nation can claim sovereignty over the moon or any other celestial body, meaning no country can plant a flag and legally declare a stretch of lunar territory as its own the way explorers once claimed land on Earth. This sounds reassuring on paper, but it creates a strange gray area in practice. If a nation builds a permanent base, and that base needs a safety perimeter to protect its landing zones, power systems, and astronauts from interference, does that create a de facto zone of control, even without a formal legal claim of ownership? The Artemis Accords attempt to address this by introducing the concept of safety zones around lunar facilities, areas where operators would need to coordinate with other missions to avoid dangerous interference. But critics have pointed out that a safety zone around a valuable ice deposit can start to look an awful lot like exclusive access in everything but name. China and Russia have specifically criticized this concept as a backdoor attempt to establish influence over lunar resources without violating the strict letter of the treaty, while the United States and its partner nations argue that basic safety coordination is simply common sense for any shared environment with limited good landing sites. This disagreement is not just an academic legal debate. It is quietly shaping how the entire next phase of lunar exploration will be governed, and it may end up being settled less by international courts and more by whichever coalition simply arrives first and establishes working infrastructure on the ground. Let's step back and compare the actual hardware, because the engineering differences between these two programs tell you a lot about each nation's broader strategy. China's Long March 10 rocket is being developed specifically for crewed lunar missions, drawing on decades of experience from their Long March rocket family, one of the most reliable and frequently launched rocket families in the world. Their approach favors proven engineering, incremental testing, and government oversight at every stage. The American Space Launch System, by contrast, uses some of the most powerful rocket engines ever built, engines that trace their heritage back to the retired Space Shuttle program, combined with massive solid rocket boosters. It is an extraordinarily powerful rocket, but it is also extraordinarily expensive, with each launch costing billions of dollars, a price tag that has drawn significant criticism from lawmakers and space policy analysts who question the long-term sustainability of the program. Meanwhile, Starship represents a completely different philosophy, a fully reusable rocket system designed to dramatically lower the cost per launch over time by flying the same vehicles again and again, similar to how airplanes are reused rather than discarded after a single flight. If Starship succeeds at the scale SpaceX envisions, it could fundamentally change the economics of reaching the moon, but it also carries significant technical risk, since it requires so many new and unproven capabilities working together perfectly, especially the orbital refueling process that has never been demonstrated in the real world at this scale. It's worth pausing here to appreciate just how different these two national space cultures are. China tends to announce missions only when they are extremely confident of success, revealing details gradually and celebrating results after they happen. The United States, through NASA and its commercial partners, tends to operate with far more public transparency, live streaming test flights, openly discussing failures, and inviting global media coverage of even partial setbacks. This means the public perception of each program's progress can be misleading. China may appear to be moving more smoothly simply because we see fewer of their failures, while America's setbacks, like Starship test flights that have ended in dramatic explosions during development, are broadcast to the entire world in real time. SpaceX has openly embraced this approach as a deliberate engineering philosophy, often described internally as learning quickly through rapid testing, rather than spending years perfecting every detail on paper before a single flight. Several early Starship test flights ended in fiery losses of the vehicle, sometimes just minutes after liftoff, and rather than treating these events as failures to be hidden, the company has broadcast them live to millions of viewers, framing each explosion as a valuable data-gathering exercise on the road toward a fully reusable rocket. This is almost the exact opposite of the traditional government contractor mindset that shaped programs like the Space Shuttle and the early Space Launch System development, where a public failure could threaten entire budgets and congressional support. Whether this rapid iteration philosophy will get Starship to a safely crewed lunar landing faster than a more cautious, traditional approach remains one of the most closely watched open questions in the entire industry. In reality, both programs are dealing with the same brutal difficulty of spaceflight engineering. They are simply choosing to communicate about it very differently. So who is actually ahead in this race? The honest answer, the one that respects the complexity of what is actually happening, is that it depends entirely on how you define winning. If the goal is scientific first on the far side of the moon, China is unquestionably ahead, having already achieved the first far-side landing and the first far-side sample return, years before any other nation has even attempted either milestone. If the goal is total historical experience with crewed lunar missions, the United States remains far ahead, having successfully landed 12 astronauts on the moon during the Apollo era, experience China has never yet achieved. If the goal is who lands next crewed astronauts on the lunar surface first, In this new era, the race is genuinely too close to call, with both nations targeting similar windows toward the end of this decade, both facing their own unique technical hurdles, and both possessing enough national motivation and resources to potentially adjust their timelines under pressure from the other side's progress. What is not in question is the impact this competition is having on the pace of lunar exploration. Before either of these modern programs existed, human return to the moon was a distant, underfunded dream discussed mostly in conference rooms with no serious budget behind it. The moment China demonstrated real capability with Chang'e 4 and Chang'e 6, it created undeniable pressure and renewed political urgency in Washington, contributing directly to sustained funding and political support for Artemis. Competition, whether we like the geopolitical tension behind it or not, has become one of the most powerful accelerants pushing humanity back toward becoming a multi-world species. Looking further ahead, both nations have expressed ambitions that go well beyond the moon itself. China has discussed the moon as a stepping stone toward eventual crewed missions to Mars, using lunar infrastructure and experience to test the technologies required for the much longer and more dangerous journey to the Red Planet. NASA has stated similar long-term goals, describing Artemis explicitly as the proving ground for the deep space systems, life support technology, and operational experience that will eventually be required to send humans to Mars. In this sense, the moon is not really the final destination for either country. It is the training ground, the technological rehearsal space, for the next and even more difficult chapter of human space exploration. It is also worth considering how other nations fit into this picture, because this is not truly a story of just two countries acting alone. India has already made history with its own successful robotic landing near the lunar South Pole region, becoming the fourth nation in history to achieve a soft landing on the moon and the first to touch down so close to the pole itself. Japan has flown its own precision landing demonstrations, testing pinpoint landing technology that both the American and Chinese programs will eventually need if they want to place hardware in very specific, resource-rich locations, rather than simply landing somewhere in a wide, safe zone. The European Space Agency continues contributing critical hardware to the Artemis architecture, including service modules that provide power and propulsion for the Orion spacecraft. Even smaller, newer space-faring nations have begun signing on to one or the other of the two competing coalitions, the American-led Artemis Accords Group or the Chinese and Russian-led International Lunar Research Station Partnership, which means the coming decade of lunar exploration will likely look far more like a global alliance system than a simple two-country rivalry, even though the two largest players remain the ones setting the pace and the ambition level for everyone else. There is also a growing commercial dimension to consider. Private companies around the world are watching this government-level competition closely, because wherever national space agencies build infrastructure, commercial opportunities tend to follow. Companies specializing in lunar mining concepts, communication relay services, and even lunar tourism have begun positioning themselves for a future where the moon is not just a scientific destination, but an economic one. If either the American or Chinese-led coalition succeeds in establishing reliable access to lunar water ice and stable landing infrastructure, it could open the door to an entirely new commercial space economy centered around the moon within the next couple of decades. Beyond the economics and the geopolitics, there is something quieter and more human happening here as well, something that easily gets lost in discussions of rockets, budgets, and international agreements. An entire generation of children around the world is currently growing up watching real footage of landers touching down on another world, something their parents only ever saw in grainy archival photographs from a program that ended before most of them were even born. Classrooms in Beijing and classrooms in Houston are, in their own ways, watching the same extraordinary story unfold, even if they are cheering for different flags. Museum exhibits are being redesigned around these new missions. University enrollment in aerospace engineering programs has climbed in both countries, and a wave of young scientists and engineers is being pulled into the field specifically because they watched a rover roll across the far side of the moon, or watched a test rocket light up the night sky during a live broadcast. Whatever else this competition represents, it is also functioning as one of the most powerful recruitment tools science has had in decades, quietly building the workforce that will carry humanity's expansion into space forward long after these particular missions are finished and forgotten by the general public. It is important not to lose sight of the real human risk sitting underneath all of this ambition. Every single crewed mission being planned right now carries astronauts through some of the most dangerous environments human engineering has ever tried to manage. Radiation exposure far beyond anything experienced on Earth. The total absence of breathable atmosphere, temperature swings between blistering heat in direct sunlight and devastating cold in shadow. And the simple, unforgiving fact that any serious equipment failure on the lunar surface cannot be fixed by a rescue crew, arriving in a matter of hours the way it might be on Earth or even in low orbit. Both NASA and China's space agency have built extensive safety reviews and redundant systems into their programs, specifically because of the painful lessons learned from past disasters in human spaceflight history. And both organizations understand that a single catastrophic failure during a high-profile crewed lunar mission would not just be a tragedy, it could set the entire pace of exploration back by years. Similar to how the Space Shuttle program was grounded for extended periods following its own losses. This is part of why timelines keep slipping in both programs, because the political pressure to be first is always weighed, at least officially, against the far greater cost of losing a crew in the process of getting there. And no nation wants to be remembered for winning the race at the cost of the very explorers who made the attempt possible in the first place. As we bring this exploration to a close, it is worth sitting with the strange and remarkable truth of this moment in history. For the first time since the original space race ended in the 1970s, humanity finds itself in a genuine competition to return to another world. Except this time, the competition is more complex, involving more nations, more private companies, more advanced technology, and a much clearer long-term strategic vision than simply planting a flag and coming home. The far side of the moon, once an inaccessible mystery hidden from human eyes for the entire span of our civilization, has become a proving ground for the next era of space exploration. And the lunar South Pole, with its hidden reserves of ancient ice, has become the most contested piece of territory in the solar system. Whether it is China's methodical, government-led march toward a permanent research station, or America's ambitious, occasionally chaotic, innovation-driven push through Artemis and its commercial partners, one thing is absolutely certain. Within the next few years, human beings are going to walk on the moon again, for the first time in over 50 years, and the decisions being made right now, in laboratories, launch pads, and international negotiating rooms around the world, will shape who leads humanity's expansion into the solar system for generations to come. This is not just a story about rockets and rovers. This is the opening chapter of how our species becomes a multi-world civilization, and we are all lucky enough to be alive to watch it unfold in real time. If this deep dive into the new space race gave you a clearer picture of just how high the stakes really are, make sure you are subscribed, because this story is moving fast, with new developments expected from both programs in the very near future, and you will not want to miss the next chapter of humanity's return to the moon.